Welcome to Uncolred. I'm Kevin Metcalf, and I know it's been a while, and I apologize for the time that I wait. It's been a while. Things have happened, and I could tell you the story, but you'd be bored. You don't want to hear it. But part of what I was doing was sort of reconstituting the whole theme of the show. In the past, it's been, again, big ideas, more abstract ideas, which I love, and I'm still, I'll still be doing. But I got to a point where I thought, boy, if these things aren't practical in some way, then really what's the point? I mean, if you can't use these ideas in your daily life to help you understand how the world works, or at least help you determine the things you should and shouldn't do, then really what are we doing but just, what other people have already done, and it might be meaningless. So that's really the goal of what I've been trying to do here in the last several months. And I think I've put something together that I think that everybody can use. And you don't have to know all of the things that really smart people who do this all the time know. And it's not necessarily a shortcut, but a lot of what is going on in philosophy and theology and sociology and all of the sciences and all these things, you don't necessarily need to know that. There are some basic ideas that I think you can use to navigate the world that you're seeing and all the information that you're getting, whether it's news, friends, family, politicians, at your church, all of those things. You can sift it through this frame that I think I've built, and I think is a pretty good one. And you'll be able to go, that's a great idea. Or, I don't know if they're really giving me the truth there. You're actually going to be able to see past the words and get into the head of the person who's either writing or telling you something, at least most of the time. Okay, that's really what this is about. So the first thing I want to do is talk about, well, what kind of information do you need? What do you need to know to be able to do something like that? Okay. Now, there's a lot of theories of knowledge, and we're not going to get into that. I'm just going to tell you two types of information you can have. The first is what's called referential information. Okay. And the second is practical information. Now, here's the difference. Referential information is information that you may be aware of. You may have heard it at some point in time. Maybe you studied it 6 months ago or you read a book, but you don't have that information at the ready. So when something comes up that would need that kind of information, you would have to go and refer to something before you can respond to it. That's referential information. Practical information, it's information that you already have. You know exactly what to do when the situation presents itself to you. And unfortunately, a lot of what it takes to really understand the things that people are telling you, if you don't spend a lot of time, practicing the skills of communication, a lot of that knowledge is referential. Somebody will tell you something and you go, boy, that doesn't sound quite right. And it might be weeks or months later we go, now I know why that thing that I heard didn't sound very well, because the information was over there and you didn't have it at the ready. Okay. What we're going to be talking about is practical information, so that you don't have to worry about not having the information at the ready. What I'm going to show you is there are going to be skills that you already use that once you abstract the skills from the daily things that you do, you're going to find out, oh, wow, this works over here too. That's what we're going to be trying to do. Now, it may not work, but I think it will. So before we get into that, let's talk about the ground rules. You got to know the rules of engagement. What are we doing? And what are the rules that are going to, surrounding what we're going to do? So, for example, if you're going to play chess with somebody, and you set out the chessboard and all the pieces are there, and then the person you're playing pulls out like, I don't know, a shoe from Monopoly and puts it on the board. And you're like, what happened? You're missing the knight and you're going to use a shoe? And he goes, no. No, the way I play, you can use the shoe and it has a move set where it moves, I don't know, in a serpentine motion for 4 squares. That's what it does. Okay. Now, you can say, well, we're going to keep on playing. But at that point, once you accept this new piece, this shoe, you're no longer playing chess anymore. You're doing something else, and you might even enjoy it, but you're not playing chess. Okay? That's the first problem. The second problem is, if it is okay to introduce some rule arbitrarily or to exclude certain rules arbitrarily, then the question is, why would you stop with the shoe? Why couldn't you bring in all kinds of different pieces from all kinds of different places and make up whatever you want to do? So if you don't have a set of rules to go by, it's very hard to know exactly what you're doing. Now, for many people, that's their intent. Their intent is to change the rules of the game so that they can put in whatever pieces on the board whenever they want, and they can move however they want to move. And when you're in this sort of an environment, engaged with a person, this sort of environment, you start to realize, like, well, I thought we were doing this, and then this comes out of the blue, and they go, well, why are they doing this? They did this over here, but they're not doing this over here, or they're able to make these particular moves, but they're not letting me make those same moves. How come they can do it, but I can't do it? And it's because the rules of the game have been changed, and you unknowingly, or maybe knowingly, have engaged in a game, and you don't know what the rules are. So the rules are very important, or the rules of engagement are very, very, very important to know. So the question is, what makes something true? When somebody says, I'm telling you the truth, or they're telling you something as if you're supposed to believe it, or adopt this idea into your particular worldview, the way you behave, what you believe is true. The question is, on the basis of what? If you go to your training class at work because they're going to institute a new, sensitivity training, and you hear some of the stuff that they're talking about in your sensitivity training class, and you go, yeah, none of this makes any sense. This all seems wrong. But they're telling it to you like you're supposed to believe this, and this is how you're now supposed to think about the world. And the question is, why should you? Okay. This gets to the basic idea of what is true and what is not true. Now, how do you assign a truth value to something, right? If you think, for example, if you're going to say like this year in the NFL season that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl, can you assign any real truth value to that? I mean, it's a prediction. It's likely to be the case, but do you know if that's true? And I would suggest there's no way for you to know if that's actually true or not. So when people are telling you things, you have to make a decision. Is this something that's true? Is this something that I should believe? Or is this maybe just the way they feel about it? And it's very difficult to do that. Well, one thing that you're going to need is to understand something about ideas of truth. What makes something true? And there's two ideas that I'm going to touch upon. There's a third idea that I don't know that's necessarily relevant, but I'll just mention it just in case you might like it. The first theory is called the correspondence theory of truth. The correspondence theory of truth is it's an idea that whatever I believe, if I'm going to say something, for example, if there's a cat on the fence, then there has to be something outside in the objective world that can be called a cat, and its relationship to this thing called a fence has to be on. And if that's the case out there in the objective world, then I consider that true. It's a true statement. So in other words, the correspondence theory of truth says something like this: what I believe, what I think, must have some sort of a match out there in the real world. It doesn't have to actually be a thing, but there has to be something out there that it corresponds with for it to be true. Now, there's some problems with this, or some challenges to the idea, like the whole truth maker thing. But that's just the gist of the idea. And here's one way to think about it. Let's say that you had a puzzle in front of you. And this puzzle, it's all in pieces. And then you have a box that has a picture. And for some reason, the colors on these pieces look something like the colors on the picture on the box. What the correspondence theory would say is you're doing it correctly if when you assemble these pieces together, the thing that you've got matches the thing on the box. That will be called the correspondence theory of truth. My ideas, something I did, it corresponds with something else, and there's a match, is what you're kind of looking for. That's basically it. It's far more complicated than that, and I couldn't explain it, but that's the general idea. There's another idea called the coherence theory of truth. Now, the coherence theory of truth is just a little bit different. What the coherence theory of truth says is your idea doesn't have to match with the objective world. What the coherence theory of truth says is you have some idea in your head, right? It's sort of the core idea. And from that, other ideas are connected to this idea in some form or fashion. And whether or not these other ideas are true are not based on something objective out there in the world, but based on how well they match or connect with the other ideas in your head. So I have this idea, and all the other ideas that are surrounding it seem to cohere with it. They seem to connect well. And that's the basis on which I would assign a truth value to it, on how well it works with the main idea. Now, just for me, this is just my feeling about it. The problem with the coherence theory of truth is that that main idea doesn't necessarily need to be true. It could be anything. And as long as the other ideas around it cohere with it, then you're calling something true that may not, in fact, be true. Now, I know it's not that simple, and the adherents or the advocates of this coherence theory would go, no, it's much more complicated than that, and I'll give them that. The only thing I'm suggesting is that the coherence theory seems to lack an objective standard of measure, something out there that's objective that everything must conform to for it to actually be true. The coherence theory seems to make either the individual or a group of individuals sort of the arbiters of truth in this network of ideas. Now, I'll give you an example of what I mean. We're talking about these puzzles again. So when I get this puzzle, and let's say that I've never seen a puzzle before, and I got a box, there's a picture on it, I open up the box, and there's all these pieces that seem to have some connection to this picture on the box. Now, that necessarily suggests a few things. First of all, it suggests that there's a who behind this box. In other words, I'm going to reject the idea that matter somehow forms in a box with puzzle pieces in it. I'm going to assume that there's a who behind this. I'm also going to assume that this who had some reason for making this puzzle thing. And as I examine the puzzle, it seems likely that I'll have the idea that the reason why this person, this who, created this thing is that for whatever reason, they thought it'd be really fun for somebody to get this thing and put it together and make it look like the picture. Okay, that would be more of a correspondence theory of truth. That I'm trying to make these puzzles look like the picture on the box because I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing. What the coherence theory says is you don't have to necessarily accept that there's a who behind it, that there was even a reason that the person, this who, made this puzzle. You can say, listen, I think that this whole thing was so that I could make a big, nice, necklace out of it. And you can start poking holes in these puzzle pieces and putting string through it and put it around your neck. And if all of that seems to cohere, who's to say that you're wrong? But here's the problem. It seems to me, once you go with this coherence theory of truth, it's very difficult to object to someone else's main idea because it's different from yours. Because while you're saying all of my ideas connect to my main idea, and that's why I'm assigning a very high truth value, they're saying the same thing about their idea. So while you're making a string necklace with all these puzzle pieces, the person next to you is, I don't know, taping them to the wall and just throwing them on the wall, putting glue and just throwing it on the wall. And they think it makes a nice pattern on the wall. If that's their main idea, then their actions also cohere with that main idea. And there seems to be no way that the other coherence theorist, who thinks that they should be made into a necklace, can tell the other person that they're doing it wrong. And so you just have two people with two different main ideas behaving in actions and beliefs that cohere with their main idea. It seems to be difficult to be able to tell one is doing wrong and the other one's doing it right, or one's better or the other one's worse. Not with that coherence theory. But with the coherence, is the coherence? Yeah. But with the corollary theory of truth, the correspondence theory of truth, I keep getting mixed up. With the correspondence theory of truth, now you can make some judgments. I can make the judgment that I'm making good progress on the puzzle. As I put these pieces together and it starts to look more and more like the picture, I can say I'm making good progress. I can also say I'm doing it wrong if I put the puzzle pieces together in a way that doesn't represent the picture on the box. So there's all kinds of judgments I can make with the correspondence theory that I can't make, it seems, with the corollary theory. Coherence theory. I keep getting them wrong. Coherence and correspondence. Those are the two. So for me, for what we're going to be doing is, we're going to be going with the correspondence theory in this thing that as we proceed forward. That's going to be the playing field, if you will. We're going to assume that whatever we think, whatever we believe, whatever we're told, there has to be some standard of measure that we can look at and say, yeah, that makes sense. I think that measures up. Or no, I don't think that measures up. And if someone tells us something that they're telling me is true, and there's no real standard to measure, or it's just their opinion, then we're just going to leave it at that. That's just their opinion. But unless you have some objective way for me to understand whether or not you're saying is true or false, then I'm just going to say, I'm going to wait until I have some evidence or some standard where I can measure the thing you're saying as to whether or not it's true or not. So that's what we're going to be using as far as sort of the playing field. It's going to be an objective standard, and we're going to be using the correspondence theory of truth. So now we know what the playing field is. What's the next thing that we're going to need? Well, we're going to need some tools or some way to navigate this playing field of objectivity. And what we're going to use is the laws of logic and reason. Those are going to be our tools. That's how we're going to navigate this particular playing field. Now, why do I think that that's the case? This is a book from a book called The Resurrection of Theism by a guy named Stuart C. Hackett. And this is where I get this book from. I recommend it that everybody, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's a fantastic book. But here's what Stuart Hackett says here. He says, if a statement about the real world is self-contradictory. Hold on, I can't read this. Let me make that bigger. Okay, here we go. I couldn't read it. All right. If a statement about the real world is self-contradictory, it is false. And this not merely in the sense that the statement is internally absurd, but also in the sense that it is a false account of the real world itself. For if we assert that self-contradiction is true, then we're rejecting a principle upon which the possibility of any assertion at all rests, namely, that a thing cannot both be and not be at the same time in the same manner. If this principle is false, no knowledge is possible, not even the knowledge that a contradiction is true, as well in that case to be a non-rational mound of dirt as a thinking man. Okay. I think that's the case. I think that logic and reason are not just essential to understanding the real world, but it's impossible to understand the real world without them. they make up the foundation of reality, in my opinion. Now, there's a lot of people who disagree with that, but I think that's undisputable. That's how I feel about it. Now, you might be thinking, boy, I'm no philosopher. I don't know all these rules of logic or any of these things. How can I even engage, right? Remember at the beginning, we talked about referential knowledge and practical knowledge. Well, the laws of logic, it seems to me, make up the foundation of all philosophy. But you don't need to know all of philosophy, because these rules of logic that I'm going to show you, I guarantee you use them all the time. And you've probably used them every single day since you've understood anything about the world. All we're going to do is abstract those ideas out and show you how to apply them when you're sifting through information and data. So this is not what I wanted to show you. That's not what I want to show. Here we go. Okay, here we go. This is from a website called Apologetics Resource Center. This is an article by J.P. Moreland, who is, well, I don't want to say beyond brilliant, but that's how it seems to me. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant philosopher. There are 3 rules that you must know. I shouldn't say must know. 3 rules that you do know. You already know these rules, but we're just going to bring them out so you can recognize them while you're using them. And the 3 rules are the law of identity. That's P is P. P stands for proposition. The law of non-contradiction. P is not non-P. And finally, the law of the excluded middle. Okay. Those are going to be the 3 rules those are going to be the 3 tools that we're going to be using as we're getting through information. And again, if you've never heard those before, that's okay, because you use these all every day. Now, as I said, P stands for proposition. And a proposition is basically a statement about the world. That's probably an easy way to look at it. Moreland goes on to explain, the law of identity, this is the first one, says that a statement such as, it is raining is true, then the statement is true. More generally, it says that the statement P is the same thing as itself, and it is different from everything else. Applied to all reality, the law of identity says that everything itself is not something else. Now, that's a bit wordy. It sounds complicated, or at least it did to me when I first read it, but here's the law of identity. You have a friend of yours and you want to bet, and they owe you $5. And they show up the next day and they go, here's the $5 that I owe you, and they give you 3 $1 bills. And you look at it and go, well, no, actually you owe me $2 more. Okay. You've just applied the law of identity. Why? Well, $5 is $5. It's not the same thing as $3. $5 is like $5. They can give you 5 ones, that's $5. They can give you a $5 bill. That's also $5. But 3 $1 bills is not $5 bills. That's the law of identity. Pretty simple. The law of non-contradiction, let me roll it up a little bit. Let me find it. The law of non-contradiction says that a statement such as it is raining cannot both be true and false in the same sense. Of course, it could be raining in Missouri and not raining in Arizona, but the principle says that it cannot be raining and not raining at the same time in the same place. Again, the law of non-contradiction just basically says this: $5 can't be $3. That's a contradiction. It's impossible for them to be the same thing. So you can see in that same transaction, you've already used 2 rules of logic, the 2 rules that one of the 2 rules or one of the 3 rules that uphold all of philosophy. That may be overstating it, but generally that's the case. And finally, the law of the excluded middle. The law of the excluded middle says that statements such as it is raining is either true or it is false. There is no alternative. And that basically is the same thing with the $5. $5 is either $5 or it is not. There's no third alternative. These fundamental laws are true principles governing reality and thought and are assumed by Scripture, the Bible. Now, some claim they're arbitrary Western constructions. These are your postmodernist nutcases, but that's false. He didn't put that in. I added that in there. The basic laws of logic govern all reality and thought and are known to be true for at least two reasons. One, they're intuitively obvious and self-evident. Once one understands the basic law of logic, see below, one can then see it as true. And secondly, those who deny them use these principles in their denial, demonstrating that those laws are unavoidable and it's self-refuting to deny them. So what Dr. Moreland there is saying is that anybody who says that these laws of logic are like constructions or not really true or it's a language thing, they're all full of crap. Because the only way they can tell you those things are true are using the very laws of logic that they say don't exist. They're self-refuting. The whole world and all of reality are described by laws of logic. And these are just three that we're going to use, the basic ones. And as I said, you don't have to be a philosopher. You do this all day, every day, I guarantee you. I got a hole in my shirt. Look at that. I got a hole in my shirt. Okay. All right. Finally, we're going to talk about labels. Okay. What are labels? So labels are phrases or words that we use to explain a whole bunch of ideas. They're rhetorical tools, basically. So if you're talking to somebody about something, they'll oftentimes will use a label to describe something that has a lot of ideas folded into it. So, for example, if you heard someone say, you probably heard somebody say social good, right? We're doing this thing for the social good, okay? Social good is just a label. And it's a particular kind of label. It's, in my opinion, an empty vessel. But there are a lot of ideas folded up into this label, social good. And as a matter of fact, you probably don't know what the person means when they say it. It's very likely that you don't know. And let me explain. So let's say that you're moving somewhere and you've got all of these boxes. Okay, you got your bedroom, living room, kitchen, and all of the things from those corresponding rooms are in the corresponding boxes. Okay, but let's say your neighbor's also moving and they also have the same kinds of boxes with the same kinds of labels on them. Is there any reason to believe that the things that in their box that says bedroom are exactly the same things that are in your box that says bedroom? Probably not. It's pretty unlikely. And the same for the kitchen, the living room, whatnot. As a matter of fact, the things that they have in their bedroom are probably pretty different, even though they're all bedroom things. And so the point I'm making is when someone uses a label like social good, there's no reason to think that you know what they think when they say that, when they use that label. And labels are used for all kinds of things. Labels are used by bullies to keep you from challenging their ideas. That's why someone will call you a racist, or someone will call you a Pelagian, right? Or a heretic. All those labels are used for is to try and scare you from challenging that person's ideas, because the emotional impact of that word for some people is too much for them to want to deal with it. But they're just using a label. And the ideas folded up in those various labels are probably far different from what you think they are. And so one of the things we're going to do, along with using the laws of logic and reason, is we're going to be challenging labels. Anytime that we see a label and we think, oh, I know what they're talking about, we're not going to assume that. Somebody says, hey, we're going to talk about political correctness. The first question you should ask is, what are the ideas that you have folded up in that term? What does it mean? And if they can't tell you, they shouldn't be telling you about it. They should be able to very specifically tell you exactly what they're talking about. And then once you know what they're talking about, now you can have a conversation about it. But one of the biggest things that we're going to start doing as we move forward is we are going to be challenging labels. People are going to be using phrases. They're going to be using names. They're going to be using terms. And we're going to pretend like we don't even know what they mean. And we're going to start asking questions. And you're going to see all kinds of information being drawn out that isn't in that article, that isn't what that person said, just by challenging those labels. And finally, what we're going to be doing is looking at how things are framed. Framing is a use for labels. Sometimes people will ask you a question and it will be framed in a certain way because they only want you to have certain answers. Again, it's not always intentional. Sometimes that's really the only way they know how to look at a particular topic. And what I mean is, if you're in a house that's got all these windows and you're looking out one window, you're going to see some things outside. But if somebody's looking out of a different window, they're probably going to see some things that you don't see from your side of the window. Probably going to see a lot of the same things, but there may be some things that you're seeing that they're not seeing. And so when someone frames an issue in a particular way, they want you to see it through this particular window. And what you're going to do is ask yourself, well, is this the best window to look through it through? Is there another window that might give me more information about this idea? And so you want to look through different windows and see if there are other things that bear on this topic that maybe you should bring into the conversation and not just accept the question or the idea the way it was framed. Again, it's not always an intentional thing that they're trying to, kind of hammer you into an idea. Sometimes that's just really the only way they understand it, and they haven't really thought about the fact that, well, there's other ways of looking at it. And you're going to help them out by asking them, well, is there another way we can look at this that might help us give us some more information? So those are the things we're going to do. Those are the tools we're going to be using moving forward. And hopefully I haven't taken too long to explain all of these things. But the whole goal is this: not to win an argument. That's not what we're doing this for. We're not trying to show people that we know more than them, because oftentimes we don't. We're not going to do it to try and defend ourselves, right? Oftentimes when people want to challenge our ideas, we go into defense mode. That is not what we want to do with these tools that we're going to use. We're going to be going into explorer mode. We're going to be going into explorer mode, investigator mode. We're going to be investigators of the world. We're going to be explorers of ideas. And by exploring ideas, what we're trying to do is draw out as much information as we can from somebody who may understand some things that we don't. If you find somebody has a different perspective than you, that's the person you want to talk to. Why? They may see some things that you haven't seen. They may know some information that you don't know. And oftentimes, you might know things about them or understand things about the information that you get from them that they themselves don't know. And that's why going into this, looking at it as an investigator, as somebody who's trying to draw out information, not trying to be right, not trying to defend yourself, but just trying to figure out what's going on behind the words that are being pushed my way. And you won't believe all of the information that you can get, and with that information, have a much better picture of the world out in front of you. That's the goal. That's what we're going to be trying to do here. Now, I don't know how well it's going to work. I've been trying it for a few months in different circumstances, kind of play testing the idea, and I think it works pretty well. But you're going to be the judge, and maybe there's some things that I'm missing, obviously. And if you have different perspectives, I always want to hear those. But we're going to proceed with this. We're going to see how this thing works, and hopefully we'll get some good ideas out of it and get some good information about it. And you'll be able to understand what people are telling you, even if they don't want you to. And you're going to be able to know how to respond to it, so that you're not taking in ideas that are just not very good ideas. So I apologize for the lighting and stuff like that. I'll figure that out down the road. But thanks for tuning into Uncolored. Please like and subscribe. Do all the things that we like and that everybody likes. And again, I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about these ideas that I put out there, because again, I'm not telling you I'm right, but it seems to me that these are some very good tools, and they have a pretty good track record out there in the world. So we're just going to figure out how we can apply them. All right, get out of here. That's enough.